There are moments that make you realize you've spent your whole life running for other people, for wars no one remembers, instead of for yourself. For Ryder Hale, a Hells Angels member who has lived half his life on endless highways, that moment came when he stared at a letter from a small law office in Washington. Old Walt Jennings had left him a mountain ranch for the price of $1. After decades of helping strangers, fixing bikes for the lost and living on loyalty rather than a future, Ryder suddenly faced the only real chance he'd ever been given, a rundown piece of land that somehow felt strangely familiar. But inside that crumbling log house, he found mine maps, old journals, and traces of a secret buried for 70 years, a Prohibition-era gold cache worth $11.3 million, and a crime that Cascade Minerals is still willing to kill to keep covered up. Now Ryder has to choose: dig for the truth one man entrusted to him, or turn his back on the biggest, most dangerous discovery of his life. Before we go any further, let me know where you're watching from. And if this story is hitting you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've got something special just for you. Ryder Hale had long understood that belonging, the feeling that there's a place waiting for you to come home, was a luxury his life had never allowed. He grew up on the outskirts of Portland, Oregon, in a house where his parents only ever shared two things: distance and arguments. Ryder left at 17, found a bigger sky in the Marine Corps, then lost more than he could ever tell. War left him a strong body but a soul full of empty spaces. The open road left behind more brothers than memories. When he got out, Ryder joined the Hells Angels Portland chapter, not because he wanted to rebel, but because it was the first time he'd seen a group of men willing to stand beside each other, no matter what, without needing a reason. Harley, leather, roaring engines. To outsiders it was noise. To Ryder, it was the closest thing to home he'd ever known. For more than 20 years he lived fixing bikes, doing odd jobs, helping anyone who needed it, and getting little in return. Those years gave him strong hands, a quiet demeanor, and a face that looked older than his age. They also gave him the ability to read people as fast as he could read a winter sky, knowing who was real, who was fake, who could be trusted, and who to stay the hell away from. The work kept him fed. The road kept his mind straight. He never asked for more. But lately, something had shifted. Maybe because he was closing in on the end of his 40s. Maybe because every morning his knees ached like they were reminding him, no one can keep running without a place to stop. Or maybe because on the nights he sat alone in the garage, Oregon, rain hammering the tin roof, he realized he'd been gone too long and still didn't belong anywhere. 3 months ago, Ryder stopped to fix an old man's pickup when it died in a blizzard in Stevens County. The old man was Walt Jennings. When Ryder carried Walt out of the wreck and wrapped his own leather jacket around the freezing man, he didn't think twice. He just did what was right. Walt, on the other hand, looked at him like he was staring at the last decent thing left in the world. "You kept me from freezing to death," Walt said, "but you saved something I thought I'd lost for good: faith." Ryder smiled and rode on. He never imagined that one meeting would change his future. That afternoon, while Ryder was cleaning the carburetor on a vintage Harley, his phone rang. A female lawyer's voice from Colville, her voice shaking slightly, as if she didn't fully understand what she was saying herself. "Mr. Walt Jennings has passed away, and he left his entire 86-acre ranch to you. For $1. Ryder stood frozen. A ranch for $1? Why him? Why did Walt trust him that much? Those questions followed Ryder the whole ride up to Northern Ridge, through pine forests and Washington fog as thick as old gun smoke. Walt's ranch sat on a low ridge north of Colville, swallowed by fog so heavy, Ryder had to ease off the throttle just to see the rutted dirt track that led to the house. The log house appeared like a faded memory: sagging shingles, warped porch steps, windows coated in dust so thick you could barely see through them. The barn to the left was nothing but a rotting skeleton, walls leaning like they were ready to collapse. The windmill out back stood motionless, blades creaking in the cold wind, proof no one had touched this place in years. Ryder killed the engine, walked up with the key the lawyer had given him. The front door opened with the smell of old wood, damp, and a faint burnt oil scent like forgotten machinery. The dim light filtering through grimy windows barely lit the small living room. One worn armchair, a cold fireplace, a few crooked picture frames on the walls. Ryder stepped closer to the photos and immediately recognized a young Walt, sharp eyes, hard face of a man used to heavy work. But what grabbed him was the group of men beside Walt, all in miner's gear, silver-dusted coveralls, standing in front of a pitch-black mine entrance. No caption, but the photo gave Ryder chills. He kept searching the house, opening every cabinet and drawer. In the little office at the end of the hall, under the desk was a faded blue tin box, the lettering on the lid almost worn away. Ryder opened it. Inside were three things: a broken rusted key, a yellowed geological map marked with lines across the northern ridge area, and a piece of paper folded into quarters, scribbled in pencil. If you're reading this, the truth underground can't stay buried any longer. Ryder's chest tightened. He'd seen plenty of bad things in war, but he still recognized that tone, the voice of a man carrying a secret too big and too dangerous. He sat on the edge of the desk and studied the map again. Strange symbols, some areas scratched out, hand-drawn tunnels that didn't match any official state map. Why had Walt kept this, and why did he believe Ryder would understand? Ryder stood, closed the tin, meaning to take it to the living room for better light. But as he passed the window he froze. Through the fogged glass, halfway down the drive, a black SUV sat motionless. No lights, no movement, no plates he could read. Someone inside was staring straight at the house. A cold line ran down Ryder's spine. He didn't know what Walt had left him, but he sure as hell wasn't the only one looking for it. Ryder stayed at the window a few more seconds until the black SUV slowly backed down the hill and vanished into the fog. He knew that watched feeling, like back in the Corps, when your gut told you an ambush was coming, even though the sky was quiet. But he didn't have time to dwell on it, because a few hours later the roar of Harleys echoed up the dirt road and snapped him back to the present. Two familiar figures rolled out of the mist and into the yard, Bear Castillo and Jax Monroe from the Hells Angels Seattle chapter. Bear was built like a refrigerator, wild beard, laughed like thunder, loyal to the bone. Jax was the opposite, younger, sharp, could pick a safe with a coat hanger if he had to. Both killed their engines, slapped Ryder on the back like they'd seen him yesterday instead of over a month ago. Heard the old man left you the whole damn ranch? Bear asked, scanning the place with equal parts curiosity and suspicion. Doesn't feel like a normal gift. Jax kicked at a rotting porch step. Or maybe Walt left you something people are willing to kill for. Ryder just gave a short nod and led them inside. The three of them spent the early afternoon cleaning out the shed behind the house. The shed door screamed like tortured metal. Inside, dust, cobwebs, and the faint smell of old oil. But what stopped them cold was a wooden staircase leading to a small loft no one could see from outside. Walt was hiding something up here, Ryder said, shining his flashlight on boards deliberately nailed over one corner. They pried them off and found a 1940s safe with one corner gouged, like someone had tried and failed to get in. Old combination lock, but I can open it, Jack said, eyes lighting up. He dropped to his knees and pulled his ever-present tool roll from inside his cut. Ryder and Bear kept searching the loft. Under a thick layer of dusty file boxes they found a leather-bound ledger and a stack of crumpled papers. Same geological symbols as the tin map fault lines or markers, but whole sections had been scraped away with a razor blade. Some areas blacked out heavy, like someone first marked them, then tried to erase every trace. Ryder flipped to the last page and saw the name Blackwater Mining Corporation. Blackwater, Bear snorted. Thought that outfit disappeared 70 years ago. Jax glanced up from the safe. Disappeared or was made to disappear. Ryder looked at the stained map again. The unease in his gut sharpened. This wasn't just a lonely old man leaving a ranch to the guy who saved him. This was about the history of this whole piece of land. Something someone didn't want dug up. A truth. When Jax finally popped the safe, the iron door groaned open to reveal thick yellowed folders. Ryder pulled the top one. Blackwater Mining operational papers from 1947, plus a list of workers transferred. A phrase anyone who's handled military paperwork knows can mean something else entirely. Underneath was an engineer's field notebook. Shaft 6B cannot continue. Risk too high. But they won't listen. They want the gold. Another line scratched so hard it tore the paper. If this gets out, the whole company collapses. The three bikers looked at each other. No words needed. They all understood. Walt had been part of something way bigger than him. Bigger than the town of Colville. And now every clue was sitting inside the ranch Ryder had just inherited for $1. Property that could get a man killed. Ryder closed the safe and glanced out the shed window. Down in the foggy valley he caught a metallic glint. Not enough to identify, but enough to make his heart pound. The black SUV. Still watching. Still waiting. And now Ryder knew for sure they weren't here to see what he inherited. They were here for what he was holding. Something Blackwater had killed to bury. He took a long breath and turned to his brothers from Seattle. "We don't have a choice," Ryder said. "We find out what Walt wanted me to see, and we do it before whoever's out there comes looking for us." Ryder held the journal Walt had hidden in the secret loft, like it was evidence from another era, heavier than its actual weight. Dark leather cover, mold-spotted pages, some edges singed like someone once tried to burn it and changed their mind. He dragged a chair into the thin light leaking through the wall cracks. Bear and Jack stood on either side like sentries. Ryder opened to the first page and was immediately pulled into a part of Walt's life the old man had never spoken aloud. The entries began in 1946. Walt was barely 20, fresh from Idaho to Washington looking for work, hired as a miner for an outfit called Blackwater Mining up on Northern Ridge. Walt's notes were short but dripping suspicion. "They say we're exploratory drilling, but I haven't seen any ore veins. Orders are to dig exactly where they point, and never ask why." Ryder turned the page. The handwriting grew sharper. Walt wrote about company guards carrying Thompson submachine guns. Nothing normal for a mining job. "Some guys say they're ex-cops, but I know that sound. Mafia guns." Bear nodded slowly. "Thompson's, Chicago mob special back then." But the part that made all three men go still was when Walt described old tunnels far below the rock Blackwater was cutting through. According to the journal, they showed up on maps from the 1920s, 1930s. Prohibition years used to run bootleg liquor and mob cash past federal agents. When Prohibition ended, the gangs broke apart. Some killed, the rest vanished, and the whole tunnel system was buried with that era. But Blackwater knew exactly where they were. Walt saw it on a map in the supervisor office, red markings identical to the ones on the map Ryder found in the tin, only the company version was complete and uncensored. Walt described the mood shift in camp the day the drill team broke into a large void behind the rock face. "We thought we'd hit an ore pocket. We didn't. It was a man-made chamber. Inside wooden crates, old burlap sacks, rusted safes. One crate split, and a gold bar rolled out. So bright I thought my eyes were lying. No one on the crew spoke, but everyone knew that wasn't natural gold. It was mob gold." Walt wrote, "That night they moved almost 10 crates out of the shaft. No paperwork, no count. I heard supervisors talking Swiss banks and bribing officials. This isn't mining anymore, it's laundering gold." A week later, 2 miners disappeared. Official report, shaft accident. Walt found a bloody shirt scrap behind a boulder near the entrance. Next day, another man quit, even though 5 days earlier he'd been bragging about his newborn and needing the paycheck. Fear settled like dust. The more you wiped, the more you saw. Early 1948, the big incident happened. Walt's crew was working a side tunnel when they heard an explosion and screams. When they were pulled topside, Walt only caught a glimpse of the shaft mouth blocked by rock and 2 of his crew gone forever. "I heard gunfire before the blast." Walt wrote, handwriting shaking. It wasn't falling rock. It was bullets. Afterward, Blackwater sealed the blown shaft permanently and forbade anyone from going near it. Walt and a few others knew they'd seen too much. Then it was his turn. Walt described being ordered into a tunnel to inspect with one of the supervisors. In the dark, the man put a gun to his head and said, "You were supposed to die down there with the others, but the boss says keep you. You've got good hands. But if you ever open your mouth about what you saw, I'll come back and finish the job." The man fired into the ceiling to fake an accident, shoved Walt down and left him bleeding. Blood soaked the open journal page, still a faint brown stain today. That night Walt ran from camp with nothing but the journal and a few stolen documents. Blackwater shut the mine months later, declared bankruptcy, and left Northern Ridge terrified and silent for decades. The final pages carried the voice of an old man haunted by ghosts. "The gold down there is worth millions, maybe more, but every bar is stained with the blood of men I knew. I can't take it, and I can't let anyone else dig it up and kill again." Walt wrote that he spent the rest of his life trying to buy the land to keep the old tunnels hidden, terrified someone would find them and restart the cycle of violence. But he also knew he couldn't guard it forever. "If one day you read this, Ryder," Walt wrote, "it's because I believe you have what we didn't, a conscience. And I hope you'll know what to do when the truth finally claws its way out of the ground." Ryder closed the journal. His chest felt like stone. Outside, wind off the Northern Ridge rattled the cracked shed door, sounding like the long sigh of souls buried in darkness for 70 years. The next morning, while Ryder was still sitting on the porch steps thinking about everything Walt's journal had revealed, the sound of a car engine coming up the dirt road put him on instant alert. Bear, splitting wood in the yard, looked up sharp. Jax's hand slipped to the handle of the small knife tucked inside his cut. A gleaming silver-gray sedan, way too clean for the backwoods of Colville, rolled slowly into the yard. The door opened, and a man in a black suit stepped out, polished shoes not even dusty, as if the dirt road hadn't dared touch him. "Mr. Ryder Hale?" His voice was low, confident, but carried the faint arrogance of someone used to giving orders rather than asking. Ryder stood up straight, hands still in his jacket pockets, neither hostile nor friendly. "Who's asking?" The man flashed a practiced, fake polite smile. "Graham Lowell, representing Cascade Minerals. We're interested in this property. I believe you just became the legal owner?" Ryder answered with a single, "Yeah." Graham scanned the ranch like a businessman appraising an asset before the haggle. "This ranch sits on land with significant geological value. My company would like to make you an offer, generous enough for you to walk away today." Ryder folded his arms across his chest. "Not for sale." Graham didn't look surprised, like he'd expected that answer. "You're from Portland, no history here. I thought you'd be more practical. This is an inherited asset, not ancestral land. You don't have to get attached." Ryder's jaw tightened, eyes going cold. "Not for sale." Graham exhaled softly, "The way you do with a stubborn child. Ryder, we have plenty of reasons to need this land. You don't have any big enough reasons to keep it." Ryder took one step forward, close enough that Graham had to tilt his head up. "I've got a reason." His name was Walt Jennings. For the first time Graham's smile faltered, just half a second, but Ryder caught it. Graham adjusted his tie, tone losing its friendliness. Walt Jennings was a stubborn old man, and he owned things he shouldn't have. "Shame he dragged you into this." "Into what?" Ryder asked. Graham didn't answer. "We'll be back with another offer. I suggest you think it over before things get complicated." He turned toward his car, but before sliding in he paused and lowered his voice. "Some things underground are smarter left alone. Dig too deep. Sometimes the past comes up in ways nobody wants." Then he shut the door, and the sedan sped off fast enough to barely raise any dust. Bear walked over the second the car disappeared. "That guy reeks of bad news," Jack said flat out. "I wanted to punch him the moment he opened his mouth." Ryder didn't smile. From Graham's tone, from the look in his eyes, Ryder felt something clearer than any battlefield threat. Cascade Minerals knew what was under Northern Ridge, and they were scared of it coming to light. Evening fell, wind hissed through the pines like whispers. Ryder and the two Seattle brothers started double-checking the ranch, locking doors, securing the shed, hiding anything that could look like a clue. But that night, when Ryder stepped onto the porch for more firewood, he saw the iron gate at the bottom of the hill standing wide open. He was dead certain Bear had locked it that afternoon. Ryder signaled Bear and Jax. All three moved silent as predators into the dark as gravel crunched near the collapsed barn. Jax swept his flashlight. In the brief flash, Ryder saw fresh boot prints in the soft dirt. Inside the barn, crates, old harnesses, and rusted shovels had been tossed around. Nothing taken, everything searched, like someone looking for a hidden hatch or whatever they thought Walt left behind. "They were here tonight," Bear growled low, "checking how far we've gotten." Ryder felt ice on his face, but fire inside, not fear, recognition. What Walt had dreaded for 70 years was back, looking for its owner. When they returned to the house, Ryder scanned the tree line one more time. Pines stood motionless. Wind still blew. But the feeling of eyes in the dark was stronger than ever. He took a deep breath, gripping Walt's journal tight. "If they think I'm walking away," Ryder said quietly, "they picked the wrong guy." Ryder barely slept that night. Wind through the pines, old house creaking, and the knowledge strangers had walked his land kept his nerves strung tight as wire. Bear slept like a log, snoring loud enough to rattle the windows, while Jax lay on the couch, eyes wide open, spinning a small screwdriver like a stress toy. At the first gray light through the windows, Ryder made the call. They were opening the loft safe today, before Cascade came back with more men, or the night visitors decided to do something bolder. The three bikers climbed back into the loft. Morning light slanted through the rafters, dust motes floating like tiny fog. The 1940s safe sat against the wall, steel gone yellow, surface scarred with old pry marks from someone who'd tried and failed. Jax knelt, ear to the dial, fingers working the combination with the focus of a musician. Military grade 3 tumbler, he muttered. Without skill you could tear the house down and never open it. Ryder kept watch at the loft door, eyes on the pines, half expecting, half dreading movement. Bear crouched beside Jack's crowbar ready. Jack slid the screwdriver in, turned gently, cocked his head. 1, 2, hear that? Old spring. No one heard anything but wind, but Ryder trusted Jax could hear sounds normal people missed. Click, clack. Then Jax grinned like a magician who just stunned the crowd. Morning, Walt. He pulled the handle and the heavy door groaned open, hinges sounding like they came from deep underground. No cash, no deeds, nothing ordinary. First thing Ryder saw was a large map roll, wrapped in brown oilcloth. Next to it an old wooden box of metal tools, and right in the center, a small gold bar, rough edges, dull yellow, cast crude like it was poured last century. Bear let out a low whistle. Holy hell, real gold. Ryder lifted the bar. It was heavier than it looked. Heart skipping a beat, not jewelry shiny, raw angular, like it had been dragged out of the ground yesterday. One side carried a faint stamp, a Chicago bank mark, 1929. Prohibition. Mitchum Capone. Mob runs. Every old-timer story Ryder ever heard just became solid in his palm. Walt was right, Ryder whispered. Blackwater wasn't mining gold. They were digging up mob gold. Jax unrolled the big map on the floor. Light hit it, revealing tunnels in black, red, and blue ink. What froze all three men was the symbol in the corner. Vault 6B, a thick circle around it, and a small red triangle. Mining danger sign. What the hell is in there that Walt spent his whole life hiding? Bear asked. No one answered. Ryder studied the map closer. Red crossed tunnels matched Walt's journal sketches. Some passages marked with faded dates. 1931, 1932, peak Chicago mob years. A list of 14 names with start dates, but instead of end dates, just long dashes. Walt had penciled beside them. Missing. No body. Cold ran up Ryder's spine. Not ghosts, but the kind of missing he'd seen in war, in classified reports, the permanent kind. Jax found another envelope in the safe. Old photocopied pages stamped Blackwater Mining Corporation, 1948. At the bottom Walt had added in slanted handwriting, they knew Vault 6B wasn't just gold. Ryder slowly folded the map, hand resting on it, like it was the beating heart of a past that refused to stay dead. Walt didn't give me the ranch because of the land, he said. Voice low but certain. He gave me this, the secret. He wanted me to protect it, or end it. Bear crossed his arms. Meaning what? We dig it up, or seal it forever? Ryder shook his head. First we find 6B. We see with our own eyes what's inside. Jax gripped the map tighter. But what if Cascade already knows where it is? Ryder glanced at the loft door where wind rattled the frame. Then we get there before they do. He looked at Bear, then Jax, then Walt's journal on the crate. After 70 years Walt was still scared, but he believed someday someone crazy enough would come back and dig up the truth. And he thought that someone was me. Bear half grinned. Not just you. He didn't know you travel with 2 other dumb bastards ready to die for you. 3, Ryder corrected. 3 dumb bastards. No one laughed out loud, but the silence changed. From heavy to the kind that comes right before a fight you know won't be easy. Ryder stood grabbing the map and the gold bar. We find 6B. Today, before Cascade comes back, before they decide to take the ranch a different way. As they descended the stairs, the outside light had softened, but the air felt different, like the shadows in the trees knew the safe was open and were holding their breath for the next move. Ryder led Bear and Jax out of the loft. The second the map was flattened on the table. No one spoke. Urgency hung thick enough that words weren't needed. Washington's sky was solid gray, fog clinging in ribbons along the pines on Northern Ridge. Ryder checked coordinates, pointed to a faint triangle mark. Vault 6B. Right here, he said. If the map's right, the old entrance is in the pines north of the ranch. They grabbed flashlights, shovels, rope, and Walt's journal. The trail into the woods was almost gone, overgrown, roots clawing at the ground like withered hands. But tunnels don't vanish. That's what Walt kept writing. What's buried stays buried. People just pretend they can't see it. Deeper in, the air turned strangely cold, as if the sun had been drained of warmth. Jax checked his compass, frowned, when the needle jittered near rock faces. Ryder ran a hand over wet stone. Check the map. We're close. Bear shoveled aside rotted leaves and uncovered a flat-edged boulder that didn't belong. They cleared around it. Minutes later, Ryder found a rusted steel ring almost completely hidden by dirt. He dug, pried, and pulled up a steel lift handle, the kind used on mine shafts. Walt wasn't kidding. Ryder breathed. Bear and Jax helped clear dirt and rocks. Slowly a steel hatch appeared, surface crusted with rust and green moss. Buried at least 50 years, Jax said. Ryder pulled, nothing. Bear pounded the steel, hollow echo below. Still open down there, Bear said. Shaft didn't collapse. Ryder wedged the crowbar in with Bear. Together they heaved. The hatch screamed open like a dying breath. Cold, stale air rushed up carrying rust, stone dust, and something ancient and wet, the breath of a forgotten era. Ryder shone his light down, steep stone steps covered in cobwebs and moss. The air was so thick their breath fogged, even though it wasn't that cold outside. Don't like this vibe, Jax muttered. Me neither, Ryder said. But we're going down. They tied rope to a big pine and descended. Each step sent dust drifting like ash. The tunnel wasn't deep, but the deeper they went, the clearer it became. Hand-dug walls, old drill scars, timber supports rotted almost through, exactly as Walt described. At the bottom the passage widened to maybe 6 feet, low enough. Bear had to stoop. Wet floor, small puddles reflecting their lights. Ryder matched the map to an L-shaped bend right in front of them. This way to 6B. A few yards in, Ryder's heart thudded fresh dig marks. Soil turned, uneven, recent, not decades old. Bear touched it, frowned. Moved in the last month or two, no older. Jack swept his light across the walls. New scratches, modern tool marks. Ryder's pulse pounded in his ears. Cascade, he whispered. They found 6B. Maybe before us. They pushed deeper. The tunnel split. One branch completely collapsed. Just like Walt rode after Blackwater blew the side shaft. The open branch showed fresh boot prints, pointing inward. Ryder flipped to Walt's page on 6B. They said it wasn't just mob gold, he read. They said it was something more dangerous, something that could bring the whole company down if it ever came out. Bear's voice dropped. Gold's dangerous enough. What's worse? Ryder closed the journal. We're about to find out. They moved silently. The passage narrowed. Timbers bowed like they might snap. Air smelled of metal, and something older, mass grave rot. Suddenly Ryder stopped. Hear that? Jax froze. Bear spun, hand on his belt knife. For seconds, only dripping water. Then footsteps. Light. Slow. Above them. Not in the tunnel outside. Ryder signaled lights off. 3 statues in the dark. Footsteps stopped right over the hatch. A click like a handheld radio. A whispered voice. No sign of them topside. They might be below. Check the area. Cold sweat on Ryder's neck. Cascade was here, and they knew the hatch was open. He motioned Bear and Jax deeper into shadow. If they got boxed at the entrance, none of them were getting out. Deep under cold stone, Ryder understood the race was on, and the enemy was standing right above them, only a few feet of dirt away. Ryder kept the team frozen in tunnel darkness, until the footsteps completely faded. Only when cold wind blew through the open hatch with no human sound, did he signal retreat. They climbed out, closed the steel door, and quickly covered it again with dirt and leaves. But as they neared the tree line, all 3 stopped dead. A thick column of black smoke rose above the ranch, unmistakable. The smell of burning wood hit the wind. Bear roared. The barn. They tore down the slope like wolves, flashlights bouncing, bursting through the last trees. The sight locked every muscle in Ryder's body. The already rotting barn now blazed like a giant torch, flames licking the old roof, sparks shooting red. But it wasn't the fire that made Ryder clench his jaw. 3 figures in black, faces masked, holding metal bats and gas cans, stood near the back porch. One was trying to kick in the rear door where Ryder had hidden Walt's maps and the original mine chart. Hey, motherfuckers. Bear bellowed and charged with a speed that shocked even Ryder. Metal clanged as Bear blocked a bat swing with his leather-clad arm. Ryder tackled the second guy, slammed him to the ground. Jax spun and kicked the third man's knee, folding him like paper. But the attackers were ready. The one on the ground rolled, yanked out an expandable baton and cracked it across Bear's leg. Bear dropped with a grunt. Ryder drove a fist into his guy's jaw, dropped him cold, but as he rose a blade flashed. Shink. slashing Ryder's sleeve and burning across his forearm. The knife man yelled, "Get the maps, now." Even muffled by the mask, Ryder recognized city accent, not street muscle. Orders, not instinct. Cascade Minerals. Jax flung a handful of dirt into Knife Man's face, buying seconds. Ryder grabbed the guy's collar and slammed him into the burning barn wall. "Who sent you?" Ryder snarled. "Answer." A punch to the ribs. Bear, bleeding, still rose and tackled the last man like an enraged bear. Then glass shattered. Bear's pride and joy restored. Pickup had its windshield smashed by a fourth man who hadn't joined the fight, just destroyed. The SUV from yesterday sat far off, headlights off, someone inside calmly watching the show. Ryder's heart pounded, not from the cut, not from the fire spreading to the fence, but from the single clear message: they want the maps, they want 6B, and they will not stop. While Bear and Jax fought, one intruder lunged for a crate near the back door. Ryder's photocopy of the mind map fell to the dirt. Knife Man saw it. Dove. Ryder swept his legs, held him a second, just long enough for Jax to snatch the map and leap back. "Fall back," Ryder shouted. "Don't let them have the map." Bear dragged Jax and Ryder toward the porch. The attackers' mission failed, bolted for the black SUV, piled in and vanished into the night like smoke. But the damage was real. Barn roaring in flames. Bear's truck destroyed. Blood dripping from Bear's shoulder onto the dirt, bright red in the firelight. "Son of a bitch." Bear gritted through the pain, clutching the baton wound. Ryder sat him on the porch step, checked fast. No broken bones, but deep bruising and possible crack. "They'll come again," Jax panted. "Next time they won't just trash stuff." Ryder didn't answer. He walked into the yard, stared at the open ranch gate, once again flung wide. Like the land itself was witnessing. Walt ran from this once. Now it had come collecting. Ryder pulled his phone from his cut. No cops. They wouldn't believe, wouldn't understand. And Cascade had enough money to silence a whole county. Instead, he opened the emergency channel used only between Hell's Angels chapters in real trouble. He hit the button he never thought he'd use: red call. All call to every brother in the Northwest. Used for only 3 reasons: revenge, rescue, or fighting something bigger than the law. 4 words. Cascade attacking ranch. Send. Ryder barely slept until the night finally thinned into the blue-gray light typical of a Washington mountain morning. The barn still smoldered, black scorch marks spreading across the wood like charred fingers. Bear sat with his back against the last standing wall, shoulder bandaged, eyes closed but breathing heavy. Jax paced the yard, double-checking the mind map and whatever scraps remained after the attack. Then, before the sun could clear the pine tops, the sound came. At first just a low, distant rumble, like thunder rolling through the valley. Then it grew louder, clearer, a pounding wall of noise like hundreds of metal heartbeats beating at once. Ryder looked up, for a second unsure if he was really hearing it, or just imagining it from exhaustion and strain. Jax stopped dead, eyes wide. "You hearing that?" Ryder didn't answer. He just stood and walked to the middle of the yard. The sound was getting closer, unmistakable now. Dozens, then hundreds of Harley engines blending into a single earthquake of sound that shook the ground. Bear opened his eyes and squinted in disbelief. "Holy shit, you really sent the red call." "Yeah," Ryder said, staring down the dirt road. And they answered. Seconds later, a sight no one in Colville had ever seen unfolded right in front of them. Out of the pale morning fog, down the narrow track that climbed Northern Ridge, the first Harleys appeared. Black, red, silver gleaming in the new daylight. Then more and more. Exhaust notes, cracked like war drums as dozens, then hundreds of leather-clad riders crested the hill. Every cut carried the winged death head and the rockers. Oregon, Washington, Idaho. Chrome flashed, pipes roared, and the terrifying synchronization of the column turned Walt Jennings' rundown ranch into a fortress suddenly reinforced by an army of steel. Ryder felt his throat tighten with something strange, gratitude mixed with the weight of responsibility. He'd never used a red call before. No one did unless lives were on the line from something bigger than the law. Today, 180 brothers from across the Northwest had answered his. The lead bike stopped inches from Ryder, a tall, raw-boned man with a jaw like mountain granite and a silver beard down to his chest swung off. Duke Hargrove, president of Hell's Angels, Oregon, a living legend. Duke pulled off his shades and looked at Ryder with eyes heavy as stone. Who the fuck touched my brothers? Ryder didn't waste words. Cascade Minerals. Hit us at midnight. Burned the barn, trashed Bear's truck, tried to take the maps. Duke's jaw worked. What do they want underground? Ryder handed him Walt's journal, open to the Blackwater pages. Duke scanned a few lines. In 15 seconds his face went from curious to grim. Mob Gold. Mining company that killed to keep it quiet. 70-year-old secret. And now white-collar assholes want to dig it up for profit? Ryder nodded. Walt trusted me to protect the truth. Cascade won't let that happen. If they reach Vault 6B before we do, more people die. Duke closed the book and turned to the long line of bikes stretching a mile down the road. Brothers. Engines died one by one until only heavy silence remained. The silence of men ready to do what the world will never understand. Ryder Hale sent a red call. That means lives threatened, justice blocked, truth for sale to rich rotten bastards. You ready? A single roar answered, loud enough to rattle the distant pines. Duke turned back to Ryder. From this minute forward, this ranch is under full Northwest Hells Angels protection. Nobody steps foot on this land without our say-so. Jax gave a half grin. Now Cascade's gonna have to think twice. But Ryder knew better. Cascade wasn't the kind of company that backed off because of a few bikers. They had money, power, politicians in their pocket, and they absolutely did not want anyone but them knowing about Vault 6B. As the riders set up a perimeter, every 10 yards a man, forming an unbroken ring of steel around the property, the whole town of Colville started to notice. People stood on porches staring up at Northern Ridge with a mix of confusion and fear. They'd never seen 180 Hells Angels in one place in their lives. But when Duke and Ryder rode down to town for supplies, something unexpected happened. A middle-aged woman, owner of the general store, walked straight up. "You boys up there because of Walt Jennings?" she asked, voice shaking a little but steady. Ryder nodded. "He died carrying a secret somebody wants buried." She sighed. Blackwater bought the whole town council back then. When those miners disappeared, nobody investigated. Walt was young, but I know he was scared enough to leave town forever. If the truth's finally coming out, we're on your side. Ryder dipped his head in thanks. She handed him a case of water and a big bag of coffee. Walt was good people looking out for him. That's what he deserved. Back at the ranch, Duke was directing cleanup, reinforcing fences, setting up watch rotations. 3 brothers pitched tents. A few more built a makeshift bench to work on Bear's bike. Under weak sunlight, Walt Jennings' lonely broken-down ranch suddenly looked alive, full of rough laughter, engine noise, and stories with no beginning or end. But the air stayed wire-tight. Ryder could feel Cascade's eyes somewhere in the trees, waiting for the next move. Late afternoon, Jax came out of the shed white-faced. "Ryder, this is bad." He held up a small metal device found under straw near the burned barn, a high-powered GPS tracker. "They tag the ranch," Ryder said quietly. "Not to find the shaft, to watch every damn move we make." Bear clenched his fists. "Then we give him something they don't want to see." 180 brothers staying until the end. Ryder stared into the pines where darkness was already swallowing the last light. "No," he said. "We give them something else that the killers from 70 years ago don't get to bury the truth one more time." Duke stepped up beside him, eyes cold steel. "Tonight we hold the ground. Tomorrow, we open 6B. Ryder nodded. Before full light, Ryder, Bear, and Jax stood at the mouth of Shaft 6B, this time not alone but with nearly 10 more brothers ready to go underground while the rest held the perimeter topside. Duke ordered no one into the woods unless Ryder called, and all 180 riders spread out to lock down every high point. Dawn's pale green light filtered through the canopy, throwing jagged shadows like warnings. Ryder yanked the steel hatch. Cold air rushed out, sharp enough to make even Bear shiver. Jax clicked on his flashlight. The white beam cut the darkness like a blade. "Let's go," Ryder said, voice low and certain. They descended step by step, boots echoing like the mountain itself answering back. The air was thick with old water, rotted timber, and decades-dead oxygen. The familiar tunnels appeared exactly as Walt described. Stained walls, eaten supports, boulders that looked ready to fall but somehow hadn't. But the deeper they went, the clearer the fresh signs. Boot prints, new mud, rock faces tapped by modern tools, even a long gouge across one wall from a geological scanner. Cascade's been down here, Bear muttered, anger thick. Ryder spotted torn plastic scraps, Cascade's equipment wraps. But they haven't found 6B, he whispered. Walt's map is the only one. 10 more minutes in, the tunnel forked. Ryder checked the map, pointed left into a narrow slot. Here, entrance to Vault 6B. The passage was so tight Bear had to turn sideways. 3 meters later it suddenly opened into a chamber big enough to park a truck in, ceiling over 10 feet high, walls glittering faintly with mineral under the lights, like the rock itself was dusted with gold. 12 wooden crates lined the walls, war-era ammo crates, rotted but steel-banded. One was cracked open, a corner of raw gold bar showing through. Bear inhaled like he was checking. He wasn't dreaming. Brothers, we just found what drove Blackwater insane. Jax pried a lid with the crowbar. Wood cracked open dry and loud. Inside stacked gold bars and leather pouches of moldy cash, 2 layers deep. Ryder lifted a bar, cold, heavy, stamped Chicago Bank, 1927. Mob gold, he said. What they hid from the feds, and Blackwater found it. Jax did quick math. If every crate's the same. Jesus, over 10 million easy. Ryder nodded slowly. 11.3. Exactly what Walt figured. But the gold was only the beginning. Next to the crates sat a smaller steel safe, hinges rusted solid. Ryder and Jax forced it open together. The screech echoed like a scream. Inside, an old ledger, yellowed pages crammed with handwritten entries, bootleg shipments, payoffs, offshore accounts, names of politicians, the Spokane sheriff from back then, an entire corruption map from Prohibition. Then the second file, Blackwater internal reports, 1947-48, stamped confidential. List of 14 workers, ages, hometowns, the men Walt said disappeared. Next to each name, a single red X. Bear flipped the page. His eyes went dark. Look at this. An incident report labeled DO not copy described a shaft collapse that left 14 men unrecoverable. But at the bottom, scratched out but still legible, bodies not to be recovered to avoid investigation. Ryder swallowed hard, throat like sandpaper. Walt was right. They murdered them. To hide the gold, one last envelope inside the safe, marked in faded ink. Ryder opened it. A single folded sheet in Walt's shaky hand. Ryder, if you found this, I'm no longer here to protect it. The gold isn't mine. It isn't Blackwater's. It belongs to the forgotten families of men killed by greed. Put it where it belongs. And don't let anyone buy your silence. Jax looked at Ryder, voice soft. Walt trusted you. Only you. Ryder didn't answer. He stared at the gold, not with greed or wonder, but with the sadness of an open wound that never healed. The gold didn't scare him. What scared him was how many had already died for it, and how many more would if Cascade got it. He lifted a bar one last time. It felt like holding a curse. This isn't treasure, he said. It's evidence. And Cascade is more afraid of it than anyone. Bear stood, scanning the chamber like a battlefield. What do we do with it? Ryder answered instantly. First, get every document out. Then, and protect it with our lives. But the second he turned, a metallic clink froze them all. Not dripping water, not falling rock, metal on metal from the direction of the entrance. Jax killed his light on reflex. Bear's hand went to his knife. Ryder held his breath. A silhouette blocked the shaft mouth for one heartbeat, then vanished. Not enough to identify. Enough to light every nerve on fire. They know we're here, Ryder whispered. Gravel crunched somewhere deeper in the tunnel. Cascade wasn't just watching anymore. They were inside the mountain, coming for 6B, or to kill whoever had found the truth. Ryder gripped the mob ledger like a weapon, eyes hard as forged steel. Forget the gold, he said. We get the truth topside. Bear and Jax nodded hard. They stuffed documents into waterproof bags. Each shouldered one small gold crate as decoy in case of ambush. As they formed up to leave, Ryder looked back one last time at 6B. The room of gold and blood where history was never meant to stay buried. Walt, he whispered into the freezing dark. I'll finish what you couldn't. Then the distant roar of Harleys reached down the shaft like the battle cry of an army, ready to defend the truth. They surfaced as late afternoon light turned copper red, the kind of dull glow that made the whole ranch look like nature's warning that darkness was closer than ever. Ryder laid the documents from 6B on Walt's old kitchen table, rushing stone dust off the ledger like stroking a dying man's wound. Bear and Jack circled the perimeter, checking for Cascade tails, but the forest was unnaturally quiet, as if the watchers knew they couldn't strike while Hell's Angels held the line. Ryder opened Walt's journal to the final pages, ink dark, shaky, heavy, almost indented with the desperation of the writer. Walt's voice rang in his head as the words leapt off the page. The day I walked out of that mine, I thought I'd left the darkness behind. But darkness followed me. It lives in sleep, in every small noise, in strangers' eyes. It is the memory of men I couldn't save. Ryder turned the page slowly. Old paper and smoke from last night's fire, mixing in the air. The day they killed 4 more of us, Walt wrote. I understood Blackwater didn't just want the gold, they wanted silence. Gold wasn't the only thing they buried. They buried the voices of the poor, the workers, the nameless, who died for nothing. And they thought they could bury our consciences too. The next line was scratched out hard, as if Walt regretted writing it but couldn't erase it completely. I lived because I was a coward. I ran, but I swear one day the truth will see daylight. Ryder's fingers tightened on the edge of the book. He'd seen the same guilt in war, survivors carrying the crime of being the one who walked out. Bear and Jax came in and sat as Ryder turned the page. Walt wrote about buying the 86 acres when he was nearly 70. No one understood why a lonely old man with no family would spend his life savings on worthless rock. But Walt knew. I have to protect it, he wrote. If I die before I find someone worthy, some company will dig it up again and more people will die. I know them. There's no shortage of greedy men in this world. Then he spoke directly about choosing Ryder. I met Ryder Hale when my heart had almost stopped beating. In a blizzard he carried me out of that wreck and wrapped his own leather around me. He didn't ask who I was, if I had money, if I was worth the trouble. He just did what was right. This world rarely showed me unconditional decency. Ryder reminded me it still exists. Ryder's chest felt like a boulder sat on it. He remembered that night. Headlights cutting through snow, pickup upside down, Walt purple-lipped and shaking. To Ryder it was just another night helping a stranger. To Walt it was apparently the first time in 50 years someone proved the world wasn't completely lost. I didn't choose Ryder because he's strong, Walt continued, but because strength doesn't tempt him. I didn't choose him for being poor or rich, but because I saw in his eyes what I once saw in the good men who died in that mine, a look that never bows to evil men. Bear sniffed and looked away to hide the shine in his eyes. Jax just nodded, lamplight catching the wet in his own. Ryder read on. If Ryder finds 6B, he's gone farther than I ever dared. Then he must decide what I was too cowardly to decide. Dig it up or let it sleep forever. But I beg him to understand. The gold isn't mine. It isn't Blackwater's. It belongs to the families who lost fathers, brothers, sons to men who thought money could buy silence. Another page, ink pressed so hard it nearly tore the paper. If Ryder is reading this, my time is over. But if he's still breathing, still standing, still fighting, then give back the light that was stolen from them. Do what's right, not what's easy. Ryder closed his eyes a moment. He'd heard almost those exact words from an old CO right before the man took a round in the desert. Right is rarely easy. But it's still right.
Jax looked over.
You know what Walt's asking. Ryder set the journal down. He wants us to give the gold back to the people it belongs to. Bear ground his teeth. We can do that, but Cascade won't allow it. They want the gold to buy power, silence, politicians, and that's why Walt picked Ryder, Jack said quietly. None of us give a damn about money. Ryder looked at both of them and knew they were right. The gold in those crates meant nothing to him. No more than nameless metal he'd seen on battlefields. But the responsibility to the man who trusted him with his dying breath was crushing. We're bringing the gold up, Ryder said finally. But Walt's way. Not one bar touches greedy hands. Not one more person gets buried for it. Bear let out a long breath. Good. Because I swear if those bastards come back, I'm planting them at the foot of this mountain. Jax gave a small grin. Then we move before Cascade masses up. Ryder placed his hand on Walt's journal, solemn as if touching the heart of a fallen brother. Walt lived his whole life in fear, but he died with hope, Ryder said. Hope that someone would finish what he couldn't. Duke stepped into the kitchen right then, nodded once at the open journal. So you read what he left you?
Bulls.
Ryder nodded. He picked me. Duke laid a heavy hand on Ryder's shoulder. No, son. He picked us. Outside, wind off Northern Ridge carried the last wisps of smoke from the burned barn through the pines, a soft reminder that the truth had slept long enough. That afternoon, while Ryder was still huddled with Duke and the brothers planning how to get the documents off the ranch without Cascade noticing, the sound of car engines mixed with the synchronized crunch of boots on dirt rolled in from the gate. Not Harleys. Heavy diesel growl and military-grade tires chewing gravel. Bear glanced out the window and spat. They're here. Ryder stepped onto the porch just as 3 black armored SUVs and 1 tactical truck pulled up and stopped dead in front of the gate. Doors flew open. 20 men in semi-military tactical gear, black caps, slung semi-automatic rifles, poured out with crisp, practiced movements that left no doubt about hostile intent. At the center stood Graham Lowell, still in his suit, leather gloves, face cold as the rock Blackwater once tore out of the ground. Cascade Minerals had dropped the polite corporate mask. Today they came as a well-funded, well-armed criminal outfit with nothing left to lose. But they hadn't counted on one thing. The sound of 180 Harley engines firing up at once behind Ryder. Duke walked forward, slow and deliberate. Bikers from Oregon, Idaho, and Washington formed a solid line. Leather stretched tight across shoulders, eyes unblinking. 180 riders parked their bikes in a half-moon, engines idling hot, pipes smoking like a living wall of steel. Hell's Angels don't need guns to look dangerous. Their power comes from something else. Unbreakable belief in brotherhood and pure contempt for cowards who use force to intimidate the innocent. Graham took a few steps forward and raised a hand. His mercenaries fanned out. Ryder Hale, he called, voice carrying across the tense open ground like a wire about to snap. We've come for what belongs to the company. Ryder didn't move. This ranch belonged to Walt Jennings. Now it belongs to me. Graham gave a thin, hollow laugh, the sound of metal hitting stone. You think this pack of old bikers can stop us? He never finished the sentence. Duke stepped in front of Ryder, taller, colder, voice like dry thunder. Not old, united. 20 of yours against 180 of mine. Want to see how that math works? The mercenaries shifted, but Graham raised a hand to hold them. We just want the documents. Hand them over and we leave. Ryder knew this moment would come. He had to choose surrender the evidence and let 14 men murdered 70 years dead stay forgotten, or stand tall the way Walt wanted and face Cascade in broad daylight. He pulled his phone from his cut. Documents? Ryder said. Don't need to steal them. I'll show the whole damn world. Before Graham could react, Ryder hit the live stream button. The screen lit up, pointed straight at Graham's suddenly pale face. This is Ryder Hale, he said, voice calm and terrifying, standing on Walt Jennings' ranch, Northern Ridge. And this, he held up the mob ledger, is proof of what Cascade Minerals is trying to hide. Duke fired up a second phone, streaming from 4 angles around the ranch. Brothers mass shared the feed. In seconds, 500 people in Colville were watching. 1 minute 3,000. 3 minutes 50,000 across Washington state. Ryder opened the Blackwater file and read aloud. In 1948, Blackwater Mining, with the help of local officials, covered up the deaths of 14 workers by burying them in Shaft 6B. Cascade Minerals, Blackwater's successor, is now trying to reclaim the gold cache to continue laundering money through mining projects. Graham lunged for the phone, but Bear stepped in front like a wall of meat. Ryder shoved the camera in Graham's face. And this is the man who sent armed thugs to attack the ranch last night. Graham took one step back, just enough for Ryder to know the live stream couldn't be stopped by force. He spun to his mercenaries. Take him. The second one started to raise his rifle. Duke lifted a hand. 180 Harleys roared as one, pipes ripping the air like thunderclaps. The ground shook. The mercenaries froze for one heartbeat. That single heartbeat was when Cascade lost, not because of weapons, but because of something money can't buy, the credibility of a community united against the filth and power. Meanwhile, the live stream chat exploded. Colville locals, Walt always said the truth would come up. Cascade are killers. Call the news. Call the FBI. A verified Seattle Chronicle account posted, Ryder Hale, we're on the way. Keep the stream live. Graham saw everything spiral beyond control. He signaled retreat. But before he could turn, 3 FBI SUVs with blue lights flashing screamed up the main road. A federal agent stepped out, badge raised. We've received reports of illegal activity involving Cascade Minerals. As of now, you are barred from this property. Graham tried. You have no jurisdiction. We have jurisdiction over federal crimes, the agent said. ice cold. And Mr. Hale's livestream provides probable cause to detain you for questioning. The mercenaries were separated, searched, weapons confiscated. Some started to panic when they realized the cameras were still rolling. Graham was cuffed right there in Walt's dirt. He glared at Ryder with pure hate and fear. You haven't won, Ryder Hale. That gold will bury you the way it buried them. Ryder looked him dead in the eye. Truth doesn't bury anyone. Only people scared of truth get buried. The FBI loaded Graham and his crew into the SUVs. As the convoy rolled down the hill, 180 Harleys fired up again, not in challenge but as a farewell to the defeated. Duke stepped beside Ryder, hand on his shoulder. Brothers, he called so everyone could hear. Today we didn't win because we're tough. We won because we were right. The bikers roared as one, shaking the ground one last time. Ryder checked his phone. The live stream had passed 1 million views. Messages poured in from reporters, human rights groups, even a few opposition politicians. Cascade Minerals hadn't just lost the fight. They'd lost the war for public opinion. When Cascade Minerals was escorted off Northern Ridge, the air on the ranch finally lightened, as if the land itself could breathe after 70 years crushed beneath secrets and blood. But Ryder knew beating Cascade was only the first step. The real work, the work Walt had trusted him with, began right after. The next day, Ryder, Bear, and Jax spread the maps, documents, and list of the 14 missing miners across Walt's kitchen table. Every name on that list became a weight on Ryder's chest. Men who'd worked to feed families, erased from the earth with no grave, no funeral, no explanation. Walt had carried that guilt his whole life. Now Ryder carried the duty to bring them back into the light. For 3 straight days, Ryder made calls, dug through public archives, talked to old-timers in town, and worked with a Seattle Chronicle reporter to verify every identity. Bear and Jax tracked down descendants through veterans groups, civil records, and social media. When the first calls connected, Ryder expected anger. Instead, he got choked silence from families who thought their own history was lost forever. My grandfather disappeared when my dad was 3, one woman said, voice shaking like dry leaves. We never knew what happened. Thank you for not letting them be forgotten. Ryder could only answer, they deserve to be remembered, and this gold belongs to them. When the families started arriving in Colville, Ryder held a simple gathering on the ranch yard. No fancy ceremony, no speeches, just 14 families under the old pines while Ryder placed the gold bars in front of them, divided exactly as Walt's journal instructed. An old man with snow-white hair held a bar like it was his father's ashes. He looked at Ryder, then at Duke and the bikers standing behind him and said, my dad died with no one on his side. Thank you for finally being the ones who did what was right. In that moment, Ryder felt something loosen in his chest for the first time since he'd set foot on Northern Ridge. He wasn't just returning gold, he was returning dignity, truth, and light to people buried in darkness far too long. After every family received their share, 3 gold bars and the cash from the old leather pouches remained. Duke asked, what about the rest? Ryder glanced at Bear and Jax. We start a fund, he said. Jennings Veterans Fund, for Stevens County vets. For men like Walt, like us. Survivors who carry wounds nobody sees. No one argued. Hell's Angels are misunderstood, judged, but they understand loyalty and old soldiers' pain better than most. Word of the Jennings Veterans Fund spread across Washington faster than Ryder expected. Veterans organizations sent thanks. Newspapers praised Ryder and the Hells Angels for breaking a 70-year silence. Colville, once wary of bikers, now greeted them with free coffee, honest handshakes, and words like, you boys are welcome here anytime. But the biggest job remained, the ranch itself. Ryder stood in front of Walt's old log house, thinking about the man's life, running from the past, refusing help, living alone in the woods so he wouldn't drag anyone else into his fear. This ranch, it can't just be a house, Ryder told Duke. It has to be a place that heals. And so the Jennings Veterans Home was born, a community house for Stevens County veterans. There, Jax, Duke, and dozens of brothers rebuilt the barn into a common room, replaced the roof, rebuilt the fences. Local tradesmen volunteered. A retired Army doc started coming once a week for PTSD counseling. The day the sign went up, Ryder stood on the porch watching bikers bolt the new wooden plaque to the railing. For Walt, Ryder said quietly. Duke nodded. For every man who never made it topside. That afternoon, the wind through the pines carried the smell of sap, smell of new beginnings. Townspeople lined the dirt road waving as 180 bikes rolled out slow, not like an invading force but like guardians leaving behind something worth protecting. The looks they got from Colville folks weren't fear anymore. They were respect. Ryder stayed on the porch as the column disappeared down the hill. He looked up at the purple evening sky and thought of Walt, of the words he wrote, of the fragile faith one man kept in a cruel world placed in him. "Walt," he whispered, "you don't have to guard it alone anymore." Northern Ridge was no longer a graveyard for secrets. It had become a birthplace for justice. In the days after Jennings' Veterans Home opened, life on Northern Ridge changed in ways Ryder never imagined. Veterans from all over Stevens County started showing up with stories no one had listened to for decades. And in the place once choked by secrets and fear, they found warmth in the log house Walt left behind, now truly a home for men carrying invisible wounds. But the day always comes. The day the 180 bikers prepared to leave the ranch. No more Cascade gunmen lurking. No more black SUVs in the dark. Just quiet pines standing witness to the end of an era. Ryder stood on the porch watching Duke, Bear, Jax and the whole column line up to ride out. Washington sunset painted their backsides gold-orange, softening the hard edges they wore on the road. Duke walked up last, placed a stone-heavy hand on Ryder's shoulder. "You did what nobody thought a biker could do," he said. "You gave the dead their names back, the land back to the worthy, and silence back to a man who carried secrets his whole life." Ryder gave a small smile. "We did it, not me." Duke raised an eyebrow. "Whose we're without someone to lead the way?" Ryder shook his head. "I just did what Walt wanted." "No," Duke said, voice low and proud. "You did what Walt believed you could. That's the big one." Bear crushed Ryder in a rough bear hug, then lightly punched his own still healing shoulder. "When you need us, one call." Jack slung an arm around Ryder's neck, grinning. "Don't let the vets get too rowdy, and change the Harley oil every 3,000 miles. Ryder actually laughed. The first real laugh since he'd come to Colville. Then 180 engines fired together, the valley filling with a wave of steel thunder. As the column rolled down the hill, tires kicking dust into the sunset, Ryder stood straight and threw them an old-school military salute. They answered with long roaring pulls on the throttle, like a steel beast walking off the battlefield. When the sound finally faded to wind in the pines, the ranch felt strangely peaceful. Ryder walked inside the log house. Kitchen still smelled of the coffee Bear brewed that morning. The rolled-up map of Shaft 6B sat on the table, and next to it, Walt's journal, open, bookmark on the last page. Ryder sat in the same chair Walt once used, touched the journal like touching the back of a father he never had. He opened to the final page. Shaky handwriting slanted right, as if written by tired hands that knew they were leaving this world. "If you're reading this, Ryder, it means everything is either ended or just begun. I don't know what you'll do with 6B, with the gold, with the truth. But I know this. I trusted you not because you were strong, but because your heart never rusted with fear or greed." Ryder swallowed hard. The sting behind his eyes was one he'd trained himself long ago to ignore. "I lived my whole life with a legacy of darkness. You, Ryder, live the rest of yours with a legacy of light. Don't let this land stay a place that buries secrets. Let it be a place where good begins." The last line hit like a fist to the chest. "This ranch took care of me when I fell apart. I believe it will take care of you, and whoever you choose." Ryder closed the journal, held it to his chest a few seconds. Then he stood and walked back out to the porch. Washington dusk was fading, but the last light still caught the ridges around Colville. This was the land Walt had fled his whole life, and the place he placed his final bet on humanity. Ryder looked down at his boots on the ground. Walt sold him for $1. Land that wasn't just dirt. It was the legacy of a promise, of one man's belief that kindness can still take root, even in a brutal world. He bent his head and spoke so softly, the wind almost carried it away. "I took care of your land, old man, and it took care of all of us." He looked up. Jennings' Veterans Home stood solid. Fresh roof, wide porch where a couple of vets were doing light PT in the evening air. An older man waved at Ryder with a real smile, maybe the first in years. Down the dirt road kids rode bikes past without fear. A woman left a thermos of hot coffee on the step with a note. "Colville, thanks you." where whispers of fear about Hell's Angels once lived. People now said to each other, "They're the best people we ever met." Ryder rested a hand on the wooden rail, breathed in pine sap and damp earth. He no longer felt like a road drifter living on borrowed time. He was no longer war's shadow, or a biker with no tomorrow. He had become the keeper of Walt Jennings' legacy, a legacy not of gold but of courage, compassion, and refusing to bow to evil. And the ranch was no longer a hiding place for secrets. It had become a place of rebirth, a stronghold of goodwill, healing, and belonging for men who'd forgotten what welcome felt like. As the sun finally slipped behind the pines and darkness felt gentle, no longer threatening, Ryder closed the porch door and looked back at the warm glow inside the log house. One long chapter of his life had closed. Another, brighter, wider, truer, had just begun. Northern Ridge was no longer a grave. It had become home, and Ryder Hale had finally found the place he belonged. Make sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next stories full of emotion and suspense. See you on the next ride, where other secrets are waiting to be uncovered.